How's it going? Good. I am so excited to be with you guys today. Though, quite frankly, as a mum, I'm quite excited to be anywhere these days. Are there any other parents here today? Would you just raise your hand for me? Oh, you have a day out too. Okay, so today I'm going to share with you the story of how I uncovered what I now consider to be my life's work. And I'm going to show you how you can shape your child's mind, and therefore their life, through the amazing power that is music. Because as well as being a mum, I'm also a musician and an NLP practitioner and hypnotherapist, but my kids don't really understand what any of that is, as far as they're concerned. I'm just a mum, which is an interesting phrase, don't you think? Just a mum. Because I actually believe that as parents, that's you too, dads, that we, as the first educators of our children, are the key to a completely different future for our planet. Now, when I was 5 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I begged my mum for piano lessons, and I knew I wanted to teach in some way. But back then, music wasn't really considered a career, so whilst I was really good at school, I kind of bumbled through college and kind of fell into a sales career, which was actually rather good at for about 20 years, until the wheels on my life completely fell off. In the space of a few short years, I lost my brother suddenly, had 2 babies, left my career, lost my dad also suddenly, and left a long-term marriage that was not serving us. I found myself trapped in my head and struggling to make sense of what was real, with 2 young children who needed everything from me, and I had so little to give. I was broken. I turned to things like yoga and meditation as a way to cope, and initially it was just the quickest I'd ever fallen asleep in my life, so it was worth it just for that. But with time and with practice, I learnt how to focus my mind. And the more I focused on the world within, the more I was looking around at my life, knowing that I needed to make some big changes. Now, when my children were about 2 and 6 months, I took them to a toddler music session. Now, if you haven't been to anything like this before, if you can imagine 15 knackered-looking parents, possibly with some sick in their hair, like manically waving maracas and pretending to have a great time, singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, this is what it was like. And I was just dying just a little bit on the inside and thinking, oh, this is awful. I could do better than this. And then I thought, oh, I could do better than this. And so, the very next day, I started designing leaflets. I went and looked at some halls, and for the next 6 years, I ran music sessions for under 5s, and it was glorious. And it put me back in touch with someone I'd forgotten, myself. But here's the thing. I don't know about you, but Twinkle Twinkle kind of makes me want to gouge my own eyes out with a ballpoint pen. And you add into that, I was doing these sessions sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. Something had to give, you know? And then one day, on the way to my session, Fame came on the radio, and I was transported in my mind. I was 9 years old in my shiny red catsuit and my stripy leg warmers, like flinging myself around my mum's living room. And I got the most amazing feeling of freedom and joy, like I was a kid again. Because music does that. It evokes feelings and memories. It's part of our story. You all have a soundtrack to your life, right? So this moment had quite an impact on my work, because what I started doing was dropping in silly fun stuff from my childhood, mainly for my own entertainment, if I'm honest. So we might do the conga, or I'd drop in something by Queen. Or if we were doing songs about animals, I might sing The Lion Sleeps Tonight by Tight Fit. Anything just to break up the monotony of children's music. But when I did that, something magical would happen. And you couldn't just see it, you could feel the energy change in the room. And that's because the parents were having actual fun, instead of Mary Poppins pretend fun. And this was backed up recently by the Australian longitudinal study of 3,000 preschool children. And this study found that informal music making in the home can have effects far and above that of even reading. Now, there's obvious benefits to learning with music. So there's language acquisition and verbal ability, but music gives us so much more. Science shows us that it lights our whole brain up. There's different instruments, sometimes playing different parts. There's pitch, there's tone, there's volume, there's percussion. And interestingly, it's the space between the notes that is as important to the structure as the notes themselves. But music teaches so much more. It teaches collaboration, patience, connection. And this study found that it was this connection, the synchronicity and fun-making between a loving parent or caregiver and the child, that actually supercharges the message and strengthens those neural pathways so much more. Let me show you what I mean. So, would you just raise your hand for me if you can remember anything your parents told you when you were 3 or 4? No, right? Okay, so I'm going to sing the first line of a song, and I'd like you to sing the next line back to me. Are you ready? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. Beautiful, thank you. Now, I chose the alphabet song today because we have an English-speaking audience. But I know that you could choose any song from your childhood, and it would have exactly the same effect on your memory. And that's because the brain loves patterns. It loves chunking things up into rhymes and rhythms. And you put a tune to it, and you are singing it all day. Sometimes whether you want to or not. But I also chose the alphabet song today because it's a really difficult piece of information for young children to grasp. It's 26 consecutive letters. There's no context, and there's no story. But you put that into the vehicle of a song. Not only did you learn that when you were 3 or 4, but you can recall it 30, 40, 50 years later. It's in. Now, when my eldest child was about 5, I really struggled to connect with him. He found it very difficult to be present and follow simple instructions. So, do you know like how kids don't listen? Like ever. If you times that by 10, that's where we were. And it meant that transitional times like getting out the house and bedtimes and things were incredibly stressful. And then one day, I was trying to tell him something for the 15th time, and Bob the Builder came on the stereo and he just started singing it. I mean, it just went straight in where my words hadn't. And I realised I'd found a way to reach him. So initially, I started writing music just to help me and my kids out. So I wrote a song to get them to brush their teeth for 2 whole minutes. I wrote a song to get them to stop on their scooter. I wrote songs for dropping them off at nursery and to calm them down for bed. I wrote songs for tapping too. Anyone not familiar with tapping or EFT? It's a bit like acupressure for the emotions. Really lovely to do with children. I wrote songs about the body's early warning signals, but these songs went in so quickly and they worked like a charm. So I took them into my music sessions and they worked like magic with everybody else's children as well. And then other people started asking me for songs. So a psychologist asked me for a shoes and coat song, so I wrote one to get them on in 5 seconds. And a friend of mine came over one evening for a glass of grape juice and literally had her head in her hands like this, and she said, "Would you please just write a song to make them pick their pants up off the floor?" So I did. But I also remembered everything that I'd learned from my sessions and the research about the fun. So some of them were rock tracks. We did air guitar and bad wedding dancing championships, which was totally inspired by the fame moment, by the way, to increase the connection and make the message go in. And Pick Up Your Pants became a massive, banging house track. You want to see? Okay.
Pick up your pants, pick up your pants, pick up your pants, pick up your
I love my job. But what I loved most about it was that we were taking moments that were originally driven by stress and control, which comes from a place of fear, and we were turning them into moments of love and fun and connection. I mean, my kids even started looking forward to the moments that had previously been so stressful. Now, by this time, I had become more and more interested in the power of the mind. I'd been meditating for many years. I'd retrained in NLP and hypnotherapy, and I became fascinated with the unconscious mind, and in particular, belief. So, what is a belief, and why is it so important? Well, our beliefs are the very essence of who we think we are. They're the stories that we tell ourselves about how the world is, what we're capable of, and who we think we're going to be. And these stories go on to become like a default program or hard drive that we then use to run the rest of our lives on a 95% unconscious basis. Autopilot. And these beliefs, once installed, are so strong that our brain will actually look for evidence to support them and will discount evidence that doesn't. They're that strong. And this program is installed in early childhood. Because between the ages of 2 and 7, our children are predominantly in what's called a theta brainwave state. Now, this is actually a hyper-learning phase, which is actually essential for their survival. Interestingly, it's the same state that hypnotherapists will relax adults to in order to access their unconscious mind. It's always also the same state that we access through meditation. But it means that our children are absorbing absolutely everything and accepting it without question. This is why childhood is so magical. We believe everything. But that's the good stuff and the bad stuff. In fact, many of us spend years and possibly thousands of pounds trying to undo those limiting beliefs that have been installed in us in early childhood. As the great Carl Jung will tell us, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we will call it fate. Now, I just want to reassure any parents of older children in here who are thinking, oh my goodness, that is it, I have screwed my child up forever. The brain does have plasticity. Things don't fully harden until adulthood, and even then, there are ways to access the unconscious mind. But before age 7, and that age of reason kicks in, this is where we have the most impact. Because our beliefs then go on to shape how we experience all external stimuli. Because let's face it, people, events, and things just are. But it's our perception of them that will affect how we show up. Let me explain. So there are 2 families walking through the woods, and the first one sees a snake. Mum screams, Dad freaks out, grabs the kids. Belief is installed. Snakes are dangerous. Second family come walking through the woods, and they see the same snake. Except one of the parents is a zoologist. So instead of freaking out, they crouch down a little bit away from the snake, and they talk about how beautiful it is, and how it moves, and its environment. Exactly the same stimuli. I wonder what beliefs you might be instilling in your children right now, maybe even unwittingly. Because our beliefs are like the engine that drive our thoughts. And our thoughts trigger our emotions, and our emotions drive our behavior. So what then if we could install a super program in our children while their belief systems were forming in a way that would go in and stay in? So with this idea ringing in my mind, I was sitting at my piano and I got the inspiration for a song called I Am Capable of Anything. Anything I put my mind to, have a dream, say I can, make a start, make a plan, All I've got to do is believe. I didn't really think my children were listening, which is pretty much standard in my house. I think one of them was playing Lego and the other one was, I don't know, making a mess or drawing on the walls or something. But I must have played that song maybe 10 or 15 times over while I was working out the chords and the words in my head. And then about an hour or so later, we went down to the skateboard park. And I'm sitting there, I was toying with my idea, and my 6-year-old comes running over to me and he goes, Mummy, I just dropped in off the bowl. Now, if you are not a skateboard person, this is kind of a big deal, particularly if you're 6. It's like a serious concrete drop. Now, my little boy had been quite confident on a skateboard, on little ramps and flats and things, but he'd not done anything of this magnitude before. So I'm kind of staring at him in disbelief, like going, what? And he just looked at me with his eyes shining, and he said, it's just like you said in your song, Mummy. I just had to believe that I could do it. And I did it. And right there, in that moment, I knew that not only could I use music to help my children out with little jobs and increase connection in families, which is all wonderful work anyway and actually essential for their self-esteem, but I could also use music to sow much bigger seeds of belief in my children's minds. I could teach them that they were enough and perfectly imperfect, that they have permission to be awesome, that the attitude is gratitude. You know these are all songs, right? Okay. That with time and practice they could choose their internal state and become a happiness generator. That size doesn't matter, because it's still got to be fun for me too, right? And that most importantly, love is the answer to every single question. Parents, you hold in your hands the most incredible opportunity to shape a child's mind. And a mind can shape a life. And a life can shape a world. Encourage your children to follow their joy. I genuinely believe in some way it is connected to their purpose. And life is short. Follow yours. Find space in your life to step back from moments of stress and fear and control. Show your children that there are imaginative and creative ways to turn them into love and fun and connection. Because our planet really needs that skill right now. We live in the most distracting and busy world, and there is so much vying for our time and attention. Hang out with your kids. Be present. Do silly stuff. Fill their minds with powerful suggestions of capability and strength. Show them that they are worthy of your time and attention, that they matter, because that all becomes part of their story. And if music be the food of love, please feed it to your kids. Thank you.